When using a hole saw in wood, you've probably already experienced that it's quite difficult and takes a lot of force doing it by hand. And when you're using a drill press, you put a little too much pressure on it and will get awful burn marks. And the tool gets very hot. And on top of that, you won't be able to get out the plug anymore. And it also doesn't seem to make a difference between a cheap and an expensive hole saw. So let me quickly explain why that happens and how to avoid it. Basically, the problem is the trapped sawdust in the saw curve. Because there's only so much room between each tooth for sawdust, and if it's full, it will stop cutting efficiently, and the sawdust that's in there will start rubbing in the curve and create heat by friction. Actually, so much heat that it can destroy the saw because of overheating. This here being the hole saw, and you're drilling in this direction, the sawdust down here wants to escape somewhere. The only way it can is out the sides. But if you don't stop drilling and press more and more, you are also compacting the sawdust, making it more difficult for it to get out. So it accumulates on the sides, where it really will start rubbing against the sides and create heat. And that compacted sawdust in between the saw and the plug also prevents it from being removed easily. That's all the sawdust that was in between here and here, jamming it in place. On this here, as you can see, it's much worse. That's really compact. So the solution is to get rid of the sawdust, and you can do that by backing out constantly and removing it with the brush and the shop vac, but there's also a much better solution.
So you can start the hole with a hole saw and then back out again, and then, preferably with a Forstner-bit, drill a hole that slightly overlaps the saw curve. Doesn't really have to be a Forstner-bit, can also be a spade bit or a regular drill bit. The bigger the better, as long as it doesn't overlap the center hole of the hole saw. After that you can switch back to the hole saw and continue with the big hole. This footage now is not sped up, and as you can see, I never have to back out.
Removing the plug still can be not super simple, but you see how this hole is completely filled with sawdust. So it's also a good idea to drill more than just 2 holes, maybe 4, and that will help a lot. Also, the stuff that was trapped inside here is not really compacted. The cut quality, of course, is also better, no more burn marks, and I didn't have to back out a single time. Now let's try the same thing with a handheld drill and an even bigger hole saw and a test piece that's like drilling into a wall.
The test piece I'm using here is some ash hardwood. On a vertical piece, it's important to drill the relief holes in the upper part of the hole, because then the sawdust can stay in there and doesn't fall back onto the hole saw. And from this view you can nicely see how the sawdust accumulates in the relief holes.
With a cheap hole saw this diameter in hardwood, it still takes some time, but I can easily remove the plug and there's almost no sawdust left in there. Really easy to remove. It still got a little hot and I had to let it cool down, but hey, that's pretty good. The cut quality is reasonably good, what you can expect from a cheap hole saw, but hole saws in general don't really produce super smooth cuts. And at least no burn marks. Also, if you're interested in a nicely cut plug instead of the hole, you can do a similar method by letting the hole saw partially overlap the edge, and that way it can shoot out its sawdust there, and it will produce a great result.
And here again a wonderful example of the amount of sawdust that gets shot out instead of being squished inside the saw curve.
So the next time you have to use a hole saw in wood, give this a try, you have nothing to lose.